So in this specific video, we're going to be talking about file and folder permissions and how they impact your WordPress security. Let's get started. If you're not aware of what permissions are, basically think of it this way. File permissions just tells the server itself what kind of files it can edit. So for example, if you set the file permissions here, and if you look at the file permissions or the folder permissions for this specific folder, there are three different types of groups. There are user groups, groups, and world. So the user is basically the website or the server itself. So having these checked basically means that the website itself can read the document, they can write the document, and they can execute the document. And then the group, and then the world. And then the world is basically anybody. So anybody can read it, but you don't want anybody to be able to write it. That way somebody comes out from the outside, they can edit any file that has the 7 out here and the 7 out here. So normally the majority of the files, to be safe, they are normally noted at 644, which basically says that you have the ability to write it as the website. So if you log into your WordPress dashboard and you edit a file, you can actually edit and execute it. But the world can only read the actual file. So that's kind of an idea and a brief overview of what permissions do and how it can impact your WordPress security if you have certain important files that are able to be written by the world, which you don't want that. But in order for some plugins to work, you will need to have to set the permissions so that the website itself can edit the plugins, it can customize the settings, and this and that. And particularly in a shared hosting environment, which I would say the majority of you, especially if you're using hosting sites like Hostgator or any popular shared hosting server environments, having your files rewritable is actually potentially dangerous. So you want to lock down your file permissions as much as you can. But at the same time, be lenient enough to loosen those restrictions for the files that need to have the permissions changed. Now, while there are many different scenarios, here's just one of them that is highly recommended. If you go by the rule of thumb that all files should be owned by your user account, so if we click on one of files like htaccess and click on change permissions, the user account is basically the server side. So we want it to have the ability to read and write for the user only. And then of group and world, depending on your hosting setup and your whatever softwares that you're using within WordPress, it can actually require you to do group and world. Now, just a quick run through here. The way you know what files are what in terms of permissions is this. If you look in cPanel, you can see on the right hand side the permissions, and it'll tell you each and every permission for every single file. And if you use a FTP program like FileZilla, it will also tell you as well under the permissions section. Now, by default, the root WordPress directory, which is basically the directory that holds all of your WordPress files, should be writable only by your user account. So this right here needs to be checked. So it should be a 6 at least. And as you can see, the majority of these are 644. Except your htaccess file, especially if you want WordPress to automatically generate the rewrite rules for you. Now, the wp-admin folder, this folder, all files should be writable only by the user account. So the user can write it here, but the group in the world cannot. So that's fine. The WP includes folder should have the exact same settings as well. So we got it here, that's good. And the WP-content is the folder where you're going to upload all your files. This specific folder is intended to be writable. So if we click on here and click change permissions just to check, it should be writable by the user account and the web server process. So that looks good. And now within the WP-content folder, there's going to be several folders that contain the plugins, themes, and the uploads, which is usually where your images go and or your other files as well. Now, within the themes folder, you're going to find a bunch of themes. Now, depending on which theme you use, you can actually tweak it and make it so that you can actually edit it. So if I go to my WordPress dashboard here and I go under Appearance and Themes, for example, and I'm managing the 2012 theme. So in that case, if I go over here, the 2012 theme is here. Now, one thing I found out is that if you use the editor, you will notice that you're not able to really edit the files. What I found here is you can either make it so all the files in here are writable or specific files are writable. What I recommend that you probably do is if you want to edit specific files, then what I recommend is just to make it so that one file can be edited. So let's say, for example, that, let's see, the functions footer.php file, you can see that you can't really edit this specific file. So what I can do is find that here. I can change the permissions to 755.776. Usually I'll do this and then I'll just edit it. So if you refresh the page, you can actually edit the file as you can see here. So I can edit it, click on update, and done. But when I'm done, what I'll do is I'll usually go back here and make sure that nobody can actually edit this. And I'll change the permissions and I'll go back over here, and as you'll see when I refresh the page, I won't be able to update the file anymore, as you can see here. So if somebody were to gain access to my WordPress blog, they didn't have access to my FTP or cPanel, then they can't really do a whole lot of damage, because you can't really edit that specific file. So that's just something to keep in mind of what you can do. But I would say in the end, make sure that none of your files have 777, because that would enable anybody to come through even outside your website and edit your site and crash your website. And 644 is usually a good number, especially for really important files and more. So this is just pretty much a rule of thumb. Once you understand this, then you can apply this to a WordPress site, to a Joomla site, to any other site out there, just simply by understanding the permissions and how certain files can be tweaked so that somebody can edit it and so forth.